I'm Mo Markham. I'm one of the hosts for Liberation Hour Radio, 102.7 FM in KW, CKMS Radio Waterloo, and we're also on Facebook, YouTube, and Rogers 946. And I have a fabulous guest with me today, a real warrior, Amy Soranno from British Columbia. Amy is an animal rights activist, and she's dedicated her life to fighting for the animals. She focuses on direct action through investigating animal agriculture, open rescue, and engaging in mass civil disobedience events. Amy was an organizer for the original Meet the Victims in Canada, which is a precedent-setting, in Canada. As a result of her work, she is facing charges for unlawfully exposing what's happening in animal farming. Amy has been featured in numerous publications, The Intercept and CBC Radio. She gives talks and workshops on animal rights and civil disobedience, and she's always creating unique ways to advance animal liberation. Thank you very much for joining us today, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Our pleasure, for sure. Amy is well known in the animal rights community, and as I said, one of the big events that she is known for is the first Meet the Victims action in Canada. Can you tell us about that action, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone who doesn't know what Meet the Victims is, it's a global activism movement focused on exposing the realities of animal agriculture. So it's a civil disobedience event where a group of many activists come together and go inside places where animals are being exploited, such as factory farms, and expose the truth so that the public can meet the victims. So I brought Meet the Victims to Canada, and I organized the first action here in BC. And we had a little over 200 activists occupy the inside and outside of a pig factory in Abbotsford, BC. And we locked down in the gestation crate area. So we went into this massive room with hundreds of pigs who are confined in gestation crates, where their whole bodies are just confined by these metal bars where they can't move. They can't take more than one step forward or backwards. They can barely move their heads to even look to see the pig beside them. And some of them are even right up against a cement wall where all they can look at for their entire lives is a cement brick wall. And these pigs are inside this filthy, dirty, damp, disgusting, like dungeon-like factory forever. They never breathe fresh air. They never stand on grass or feel the sun. That is their entire existence. And so all of the pigs that we met that day, they were pregnant. And from there, when they're about to give birth, they're moved to a farrowing crate, which is the exact same. It's just given more space for the piglets. And that cycle continues their entire lives until they're considered spent. So I think that's a part of the industry that a lot of animal consumers don't realize, or they don't realize that's happening here. So we thought that it was really important to go in and show people the realities of what's happening. It's legal standard practice. And it was really, really shocking for people to see that.
So Meet the Victims is there to, just to clarify for people, Meet the Victims, the meat is spelled M-E-A-T. It's there to help people to see and actually see what's happening. So you're bringing the public into these places by going there. And do you live stream generally when you're inside?
Yeah. So every single person inside, we had 65 activists locked down inside. Every single one of us had cameras and cell phones open, and we were live streaming for 7 hours. And our negotiation was to let mainstream media inside to tour. And it took 7 hours for them to agree to that negotiation, but they did eventually agree to allow media cameras, accredited media cameras, inside to tour the farm, which was huge. A part of that tour, there was a little propaganda because the tour was conducted solely by the farmers. I was allowed to walk with them just to ensure that they were actually touring the farm. But the farmer had cleaned up specific areas that the cameras would see, and they prepared a script of what they would say in each area, and they made it seem very happy and positive, and that they were really upset that this was happening to them. However, I think anyone who actually saw that footage, I mean, they walked into the farrowing rooms where you could see the little piglets, and one piglet was being crushed by their mother. And, you know, it's just such a horrific industry. And if you just see a little snippet of footage from inside that place, I think that would change anyone. So that was a huge, huge win for the animals that day.
That's amazing. 7 hours is a long time in one of those places too. I've been in for a few hours, but 7 hours would be a hard thing to do. So I thank you and your team for your courage as well. That's amazing. Did you want to talk a little bit about other actions in other Meet the Victims actions, or have you been part of other Meet the Victims actions here in Canada? I know you've been part of some actions elsewhere, but
no, so I haven't been to any other Meet the Victims actions. There was only that one that happened in Canada, and then as a result of that, it kind of inspired this past summer other actions to take place in Alberta and Ontario, which is really cool. And I did a talk last summer called Courage is Contagious, and I think that that is so, so true, that when someone stands up and has courage and does something out of bravery and passion, I think that really, really inspires other people, and it kind of has a trickle effect to other activists. So it's really cool to see Canadian activists stepping up and being interested and curious and participating in nonviolent direct action and civil disobedience for animals.
It does for sure make a difference. And I think I saw you speak at the Liberation TO conference, and that was pretty powerful. There's also been an action in Quebec not too long ago, and those charges are still pending as well. Do you want to talk a bit about your charges and what that's like for you being charged for exposing this injustice?
Yeah, so as a result of that Meet the Victims event, and as a result of me organizing that event, everyone inside was arrested technically. However, I was the only person taken into custody. So they definitely singled me out, and they're just trying to press all the charges against me. So that includes mischief, trespass, and break and enter. And I have yet to go to court for that. So my court date was set for just a few months after the action, so last year. However, we don't know why they decided to cancel that, but I think there was mounting evidence and there was other things popping up. A hidden camera video was released from that farm shortly after, and a PETA video was released from that farm. And there was kind of this ongoing sort of pressure campaign against that farm. And so there's this big investigation that's happening to do with all of that. So I think they're trying to really nail down who's in charge for all of those things before they go through with anything with me. It can be scary. I understand that a lot of people don't want to engage in civil disobedience or don't want to put themselves in a situation where they could be met with opposition or get arrested. And I understand that there are a lot of fears around doing that sort of thing. But I think that we shouldn't let our fears stop us or guide us to not take that sort of action for animals, because I think it's so, so needed. The animals really need us to take these actions for them. So I just think about the animals. There's nothing legally that could happen to me that would be worse than what those animals are going through every single day of their lives. So it's the least that I can do for them. Yeah, and I look forward to my day in court. I want to be taken to court, and I want to take it as far as I possibly can. I want people to hear and see what is happening inside these farms. That farm is the best of the best. It is owned and operated by a board member of the BC Pork Producers Association, and it is considered an industry-leading pig farm in Canada. So anyone who is horrified by the footage that we've shown from that farm, you should be horrified by all farming in Canada, because it only goes downhill from there.
Wow, I didn't realize that farm was owned by someone from the board. That's really powerful, and I think it is true that, you know, I think getting past, or I guess somehow walking past our fears and, you know, stepping into what's happening for the animals and what we can do for the animals is important. I know years ago I had an opportunity to be arrested on another action. It was more of an environmental action, and I couldn't bring myself to do it but now I think I'm more at the place where I feel like so much is wrong with our planet, with what's happening to the animals, that we need to step up and take those chances, for everyone's future, for the future of the animals, for the future of the planet. I think it's important. And I thank you for your courage in doing that. You spoke to us at the Liberation TO conference, and you were also part of another action that day, Amy, at Maple Leaf. Do you want to talk a bit about that as well?
Yeah, so last summer I was invited to Toronto to give a talk on civil disobedience and to give a workshop on organizing mass actions such as Meet the Victims. And so, yeah, that week was really, really incredible. There was lots of different trainings and disruptions that happened so that we could put what we learned into action. And then the week concluded with a mass slaughterhouse action at Maple Leaf, which is a chicken slaughterhouse. And I was one of 4 ladies who ran inside that slaughterhouse. We lied down on the cement floor, we chained our arms together and covered them in cement. And meanwhile, while that was happening, there was another group of amazing activists who ran over to the chicken crates, cut them open, and were able to bring 4 chickens to liberation. And while that was happening as well, there was another massive group of people who were at a main intersection in Toronto doing traffic blockades, bringing attention to the horrific violence that takes place and the normalized violence that's taking place right there in that city. And as a result of that, it generated media attention. We were able to expose the inside of a slaughterhouse and bring awareness to what's happening to chickens. And yeah, it was really, really powerful.
I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. We're going to take a short break if we could. I was on the street that day. And happy to be there, blocking off the street. So that was a fabulous action as well. We will talk some more about this when we come back from our break.
65 animal rights activists run towards a pig farm and illegally enter a barn.
The earth hungers for blood.
Activists turned up at a hog farm today in BC's Fraser Valley.
Here's something you don't see often in farm country.
Dozens occupied a barn until police intervened.
But ultimately, we have to recognize that an individual is losing their lives, an individual that wants to live. And is this something that you would accept? Is this something you support?
And talk?
No, they're willing to leave,
but
there will be negotiations before we're willing to do that.
Right.
This is a revolution.
So you want them to authorize media to come look at pigs before you will leave?
Yeah.
In time to carve our names with fire.
We are here to document and expose the realities of factory farming here in Canada. We are here for the victims because we believe that what is happening here is unjust, and we are here to challenge the legal and political system.
With everything on the line.
A large crowd of supporters gathered at the farm, highlighting the culture clash behind all of this.
Is it just about making sure animals are abused as least amount as possible on factory farms? Or is it making sure that we're moving towards getting rid of factory farms? And that's what we really need to happen. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have a conflict of interest in those protecting animals and those abusing animals.
God, she got in. No, seriously,
These people leave.
When you look at these animals, the darkness just like chills your bones. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming being here, to say the least.
CTV's BC Bureau Chief Melanie Nagy was at today's protest, and we warn you, the images are very graphic.
These are the most vulnerable individuals in our society. Are we not strong enough to give compassion?
Okay, so this is Ray, and he's one of the bar managers. We may find agreement with respect to bringing media.
So why not have everyone leave the barn so that we can do our job as best we can?
Okay, but you can still assess the animals which have us all leaving, because I do not see that happen.
Is there a problem if some of them hang out here? But some people bring them right in. People there, and we can all congregate right here. That's a good compromise in the first instance. They're all currently being placed under arrest.
Hi, I'm Mo Markham, back to talk to our guest for today, Amy Soranno of Meet the Victims. We were just talking a little bit about the Maple Leaf lockdown and at the chicken slaughterhouse in Toronto, and we just showed you a little clip about the Meet the Victims action that was in British Columbia. At the pig farm, but we haven't really talked about chickens. Can you talk a little bit about chickens and what their lives look like, Amy?
Yeah, so I'm an undercover investigator, and so I frequently go inside chicken facilities, chicken farms, and broiler chickens, which are the chickens that people eat, their flesh. They are raised in horrific conditions, and I would say, are arguably the most genetically modified of all of the animals that are farmed. So these little baby birds are killed at just 5 weeks old. So within 5 weeks, their baby bones, baby organs are forced to endure an adult body, which is extremely unnatural, but that's how the industry is able to make the most money and quickly. So they have genetically modified these birds in order to grow as big as possible, as fast as possible. So when I go through these farms and I'm looking at all of these birds, there's not a farm that I've been into where there aren't birds who cannot walk. They have broken legs, they have fractures, they're stuck on their backs and they can't move, and they're just lying in their feces and their excrement. And it's really, really horrific. And then at 5 weeks old, there's workers that go into these farms, they grab them by the legs, usually like 8 to 10 birds per arm, and they throw them into these crates that go into the slaughter trucks, and they're trucked off to slaughter. So if anyone's done vigils outside of chicken slaughterhouses, you'll see birds who have extreme wounds from even just that transport experience and being tossed around and picked up by their legs. I know a friend of mine was working as a chicken catcher, but as an activist undercover. And he said there isn't a bird that you would grab that their bones wouldn't crush in your hands, that they are so fragile and so brittle, all of their bones in their legs and their feet, that the second you pick them up, they just disintegrate. And you can't get away from that. That's how the industry functions.
Yeah,
And
I think the first time that I went to a chicken vigil was outside that slaughterhouse in Toronto, the Maple Leaf slaughterhouse. And I think part of it was just sheer numbers, seeing thousands and thousands of birds on those trucks, but in every single one of the little cages that they're in, the plastic cages they're in on those trucks, or drawers, I guess they're more drawers, you see so many animals with open wounds and limbs that are dangling, and so most of their feathers missing. It's just appalling. And I was there and with friends who had not been to chicken houses before either. They hadn't been to those vigils, and I remember them being in tears, just just seeing the chickens and how abused they were. So you've done other undercover investigations, you've done other actions. Can you tell me about some of the other actions that you've done for
yeah. So I participated in lots of different forms of activism, but I think one that really stands out to me is in Berkeley, California last summer at the Animal Liberation Conference there. At the end of the conference, there was a huge mass action at a duck facility. So it was the nation's largest duck slaughterhouse and farm all on the same property. And there was around, I think, 800 to 1,000 activists who drove there in a convoy of buses. And I remember being in those buses, and I didn't know where we were going or what we were even doing that day, because things like this really have to stay hush hush until it's happening. But then suddenly I looked out the window and there was just like police car after police car just like zooming past us. And then I looked above and there was a police helicopter circling us above. And so I'm like, oh, wow, okay, it's on. And then we got to the road that led to the duck facility and the police blockaded it off. They put crime scene tape up and all of us got out of the buses and we're walking towards the line. And the police said, look, if you cross the line, you're going to be arrested. And I was near the front of the line and there was just a huge crowd behind me. And I remember looking around and being like, there's around like 10 cops standing here and there's hundreds of us. Like, what are we thinking? There's power in numbers. And so myself and about 10 others, we just crossed the line. We're like, if we get arrested, we get arrested, but we're going to try. Like, those ducks need us to be there. And so I think 1 or 2 people ended up getting arrested, but I got by fine. And a few minutes walking down the road, I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew it was down that road somewhere. I heard a crowd of voices behind me and I turned around and there was everyone else. All of the other activists took our lead and they crossed that line and we made that action happen. And that's so fabulous. I think, yeah, I think that's a huge example of like courage is contagious. Like just be brave and take radical action and people will follow. And it was really interesting, that action, just seeing the police force and how scared the industry is and how strong they came up on us. Within a few minutes of us being at the duck facility, huge like Greyhound sized buses came in from the police station, and there was like SWAT teams that came out, like hundreds of cops in full SWAT gear and like machine guns hanging off their sides, and they were all like marching in together. Wow. And it was just extreme. And there's little kids running around, you know, we're all very peaceful. We were holding up roses. And it was just so, the contrast is really interesting, and just seeing how scared the industry is of us simply exposing them, just showing what happens inside these food industries.
And how threatened they are, eh? To be following the animal liberation folks with a helicopter, that's amazing. So what do you think? Do you think the purpose of these actions is about shock value? What do you think the purpose? What for you? What is the purpose of doing these actions, Amy?
What I find really interesting about animal agriculture in particular is that's an industry that relies on secrecy. They rely on people, their consumers, not knowing what happens before, you know, animal flesh or dairy or eggs gets on their plate. So I think what's really important about actions like that is simply exposing it. All we are doing, like for Meet the Victims, is walking in with our cell phones on. That is all we're doing. We're not hurting anyone. We're not violating anything. It's just simply documenting and exposing what's happening. And I think that's really powerful. And I think when we do that in mass groups at huge actions like that in a day of light openly, it allows us to challenge our legal and political systems. And for people who do get arrested, which I think is often the point, we're able to take these issues and our concerns into the courtroom, and we're able to give those animals a voice and fight for legal change. And that's what I hope to do when I go to court, because I think that that's what the animals so desperately need.
Were there arrests that day at the duck farm in California, Amy?
Yeah, there was. I wasn't personally arrested, But I think like hundreds of people were arrested that day, which is really, really powerful. And it was interesting seeing people get arrested one by one and taken away. And other people felt so inspired by that people who weren't taking illegal action, they chose to cross the line and take illegal action and join those people and get arrested, simply to take that to the court system. And there is power in numbers. When one person gets arrested, the odds of legal repercussions coming down on that person is really likely. But when you have a group of 50 or 100 or 200 people coming together, there is power in numbers there. And our legal system is not going to put in the resources to go after every single person. So I think that's something to consider if you're kind of on the fence and not wanting to take illegal action. If you're in a mass group, that there is some safety there.
Absolutely, yeah, and the power of it is important as well. Even watching some of the actions, online is so powerful. Seeing people step up, more and more people to step up and just fight for what's right. Whether it's around animal justice, whether it's around climate justice, Indigenous rights, fighting for what's right is really powerful. So much, there is so much for us to fight for, and it's really empowering for us, I think, to take part rather than simply to watch and let other people take over. It can be really powerful.
Yeah, and I think if we look at other social justice movements and what it took for them to achieve change, it took mass groups of people. It wasn't just a small few who did radical action. It was mass groups of people who did radical action. So I think there's lessons to be learned there as far as implementing stuff like that into the animal liberation movement.
And radical action is part of it too, right? We've been fighting this for many years, and we aren't making enough of a difference. Aren't making a difference fast enough. So can you talk a little bit about that, what you see for the future of the movement, what that's going to look like, what that needs to look like for the animals?
Yeah, well, I would say for me personally, I was getting really frustrated. I was pounding the pavement constantly doing activism, but what was being accomplished by doing that? I was doing a lot of passive activism and not seeing a whole lot of changes happening as a result of that. And I think that we're capable of more than we think that we can do. And I think as a movement, we've become very, very comfortable as animal activists in sort of the actions that we do regularly. And I think that we shouldn't be comfortable in the animal suffering. They are not winning right now. I'm hearing a lot within the vegan movement of, oh, we're winning, because look at this vegan celebrities, look at all these plant-based alternatives. But we need to not get distracted, and we need to look at what's actually happening to the animals and what's still happening to the animals. And their numbers, the numbers of animals who are being slaughtered and exploited, are steadily increasing. They are not decreasing despite our efforts. So I think that goes to say that what we're doing isn't working, and that we need to step back and reassess our actions and get organized, get strategic, and really start taking more radical action. It's okay to be radical. And I really hope I'm seeing, like 2019, I feel like was monumental within Canada. A lot changed within animal activism. A lot more people did step up and start doing direct action, and I think that's incredible. And I really hope that we continue doing that. Because imagine if every person who felt compassionate towards animals stepped up and even did one act of civil disobedience. Changes would happen, and changes would happen fast. So I think that there's something to be said about that.
I think that's perfect place for us to stop and play a little clip. And I think you're absolutely right. That would be amazing to have that many people step up and just do even just one action. We're going to play a little clip from the Liberation GO conference, and we'll be back in a few minutes with our guest, Amy Soranno.
The animals need people who are willing to risk arrest and flood our court systems with animal activist cases so that the powers that be will have no choice but to listen and to address the issues. Fear is normal and expected. There should be a certain amount of fear. But we can't let fear guide us if we strongly feel that what we are doing is right. At the end of the day, our problem is not civil disobedience. Our problem is civil obedience in the face of such massive injustice. Thank you.
So that was a little clip from a speech that Amy gave at Liberation TO conference last summer in Toronto. It was a fabulous speech, very inspiring for everyone. And I think probably more than one person decided afterwards that they would stop being civilly obedient and start being civilly disobedient. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Amy, and maybe the Interior Savings Bank as well?
Okay, so with that speech, I was kind of talking about civil disobedience and civil obedience and how I feel that there are far too many activists being civilly obedient in the face of such a massive injustice. There are laws that are violating the rights of animals and their lives and are allowing for mass murder, and we're allowing that to happen. And I think that we need to violate that. I think that we need to challenge that. I'm not saying that people should be reckless and go and disobey every law. We should obey laws that are just, but we should disobey laws that are unjust. And what's happening to animals is so big and so unjust.
And I think people don't think about it. They think, oh, we're breaking the law. They don't think about, the historical context of this, that you and I wouldn't have the right to vote if people hadn't broken the law. That there would still be slaves if people hadn't broken the law. People were breaking the law when they defied the Nazis in Germany and helped children and adults escape. All of those things were illegal. People defied the state in South Africa when there was apartheid. So, civil disobedience is a time-honored way of making change, around around laws that are unjust, and that's what we need to do. You do a fabulous job of it. Do you want to tell us a bit about the Interior Savings Bank?
Oh, yes. Okay, so some backstory just so people can get caught up and understand what I'm talking about. For years now, we, in my city of Kelowna, BC, we have protested RibFest. So RibFest, it happens in my city, but it's kind of this traveling festival that glorifies the consumption of pigs, and they travel all across Canada to a lot of like the major cities. And for many, many years, we have stood outside of the festival holding signs, doing cubes of truth, doing all sorts of different things, but being very kind of complacent, and nothing has happened. Nothing has changed, not even media attention, like nothing. And this past year, knowing that, as the summer was approaching, there's going to be RibFest again, and our RibFest here locally, they get their pig's ribs from a supplier that, okay, this is a little confusing. The pig farm that we exposed, Excelsior Hog Farm in Abbotsford, they supply to RibFest here. So the pigs that we met at Meet the Victims are the pigs that people were eating at RibFest in our city. So just knowing, like even the footage, we had TV screens outside of the festival, the footage that we're showing are the pigs that people were eating. But yeah, I knew that we really needed to step up and not just hold another protest yet again that was going to accomplish nothing. We needed to really step up our actions. So we spent many months targeting the sponsors of RibFest, because we knew if we got rid of the financial aid behind that the festival could not happen. And the main sponsor of our local RibFest here is Interior Savings Credit Union. So we sent letters and emailed them and called them, and we did chalking events outside of the bank, and we did traffic blockades outside of the bank, and we were ignored. And so I said, okay, we need to step it up again. And myself and 6 other females locked down the bank. So one morning we showed up and we shoved our arms inside PVC piping with chains around our wrists, and we locked ourselves together and we locked their doors shut so that they couldn't open that day. And we made it so that they had to acknowledge and address our concerns. That's
fabulous.
Yeah, and finally, after years, they did acknowledge it, and they told us you know, our hands are tied. We have already given them money, but we did make them publicly make that statement, and we publicly shamed them. We stood outside with signs saying that, you know, they're contributing to the climate change crisis that we're going through right now, and they're contributing to animal cruelty that's taking place within that farm that we have footage of. And I think that mass shaming really made them uncomfortable, and surely will make them think twice before giving money towards that festival anymore. And right after that action, I got an email from the organizers of Redfest saying, okay, it's time to sit down and actually talk. So it works. Direct action and civil disobedience works, and it works fast. So yeah, I think we just need to stop with the same actions that aren't going anywhere. If we're unhappy with the results that we're getting, we need to step it up. We were arrested that day and taken into the police station, but something like that, you might think, oh wow, you locked down a bank, that's pretty significant. We were charged with, or we were arrested with mischief, and they dropped the charges. They said, don't even come into court because it's really insignificant. We're not a threat to society.
Awesome.
So that's something to consider.
Yeah, it is. And actually there was an Extinction Rebellion and Animal Rebellion protest when they did the bridge action in Toronto, and those activists were also released without any long-term charges because they were acting in the public good, right? Which is what you know, which is what you're doing too. I think actually that, well, I know there's ag-gag bills being proposed in Ontario, and there has, or an ag-gag bill. And there has been one passed in Alberta. Is there talk of that in BC as well? I have heard a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our Minister of Agriculture is really, really pushing hard here to introduce ag-gag laws or ag-gag bill.
I guess I should get you to explain to people what that is in case they don't know. Sorry, I jumped a step there.
Yeah, sure. So basically, it's silencing whistleblowers, and it's silencing the general public from having cameras inside places like slaughterhouses and farms. So of course there are trespass laws as of right now. So if I were to trespass onto a farm, I could be charged with that, but it increases the charges exponentially because you're exposing the industry. So if I were to walk onto a farm with my camera and take photos, that would be a huge, huge offense if ag-gag laws were implemented. So I think even if you are a meat eater, that's shocking to hear that you cannot see or know what's happening within farms and slaughterhouses. You can't know how your meat or your animal products are made. And I think that's really, really telling. A lot of people are upset and think that this is a step backwards for the animal rights movement, and I can understand why they would think that. But I think the opposite. I think that this is positive because we are finally in Canada getting the attention of the industry. We're finally getting the attention of our legal system and our political system, and they're fighting back. And that is a sign that change is happening, and change, like, things are getting stirred up, and we will not win without a huge fight. So right now we're starting that fight. And I really hope that this doesn't discourage activists from taking direct action, because that is its goal. Its goal is to prevent activists from attending things like Meet the Victims or doing investigations or open rescues. They're trying to scare activists out of that.
For sure. And you know, the fact that these ag-gag bills are starting in Canada just in the fall, started in Alberta, and now it's being proposed in Ontario. It might have already passed except for the COVID-19, and that's Bill 156. So you can take a look at Stop Bill 156. It's kind of like that helicopter over your head when you're heading to the duck farm, right? This is the helicopter. They're watching us, and they're concerned you know, they're concerned about their bottom line. They're concerned to protect what they're doing, and not allow us to see it, and not allow us to do something about it. So you're right. It is a step up. It's, you know, it's kind of the next, we've reached the next level, and they've reached the next level of concern. So it's a good thing. Although it's also a bad thing. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I think we only have a few minutes left. I just going to ask you if you want to tell us a little bit about your backstory, what brought you to veganism, what brought you to activism, and tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So around 7 years ago, I was struck by a multitude of chronic illnesses, and the doctors could not figure out what was happening to me or what was going on. And over the years, through me trying to heal and get better, I discovered veganism and a plant-based diet. So I was definitely led to veganism through health, but through my own research and investigations, I watched Earthlings, and I watched Forks Over Knives, and I watched Cowspiracy all in one weekend, and that was it for me. I was vegan for the animals 100%. And of course, that includes more than just the food that I ate. That was everything, the products that I use, the entertainment I participate in or don't participate in, the clothing that I wear, everything, every aspect of my life changed. And I was more than happy to do that if that meant that animals were no longer suffering, for me to simply survive. And very quickly after that, the more I would research, the more I wanted to share. It just felt so natural to me to be an activist. I think I've always kind of been an activist at heart, and I've always had a huge, huge heart for animals. So even before I was vegan in school, in biology class, a piglet was thrown on the table in front of me, and I was instructed to dissect that animal and rip their body apart. And I stood up and I said, there's no way in hell I'm doing that. And even though I still ate animals myself, so there was a disconnect, but I was still refusing. I said, I don't care if I fail the course, I'm not doing this. And I walked out. I also participated in this excellence program right after high school. And I was constantly giving speeches. And I was around a lot of other girls my age, a little younger, who were talking about different hobbies that they would participate in. They did musical theater and dance. And I would get up there, and one of my main speeches was talking about the exploitation of elephants in the entertainment industry. And I showed all this graphic footage as I was going through my speech. And I just knew if I was ever given an opportunity or a platform to speak in front of a crowd of people, it had to be about something that mattered. I didn't want to talk about some fluffy topic. And for me, that's always naturally been the animals. So I think I've always been a bit of an activist, and so it's no wonder I'm where I'm at now. Yeah, so I very quickly, after I became vegan, I started learning about open rescues and how to become an undercover investigator. And
awesome. So it seems like you didn't connect, like many of us, or most of us, you didn't connect animals with animals. You know, you cared about animals, but you didn't connect that to the farm animals that you're eating, right? Because there's so much disconnect, not just in ourselves, but it comes from our whole society, right? I just have to ask you too, what if when you switched to a plant-based diet, if that was helpful for you health-wise as well?
My health is very, very complex. I'm still in a multitude of studies in the States trying to figure out what exactly is going on with me, so we don't entirely know. Right. So it's hard to say. I'm still chronically ill. A lot of people don't know that. But for me, what I say is I think that my diet has strongly supported my illness. I think that I would probably be far sicker now if I hadn't have gone plant-based. And I think that the diet I eat now supports me to the most of its ability. To keep inflammation down, right, to like really promote health as opposed to an animal-based diet. That's
awesome. How are you coping right now with COVID-19? How is that affecting you and your activism?
Wow. I mean, we're in a pandemic. That's like crazy to say, like what is going on? And it's scary. Like as someone who is chronically ill, I am considered high risk. So that's been really, really scary. Every aspect of my life has really taken a turn. Even things like grocery shopping and, you know, lots of things have changed for every single person on this planet. Activism wise, it's definitely put a halt on a lot of plans, which has been frustrating. I mean, for me, action is catharsis. I constantly need to be doing something for the animals, and sitting at home feeling like I'm not physically doing something has been tough, but I think it's also an amazing opportunity for activists right now to get some training in. I've been spending almost every single day online through webinars, doing trainings on nonviolence, on civil disobedience, on so many different topics and aspects, even outside of animal rights. And I think everyone should be doing that. I keep seeing a lot of people who are like, oh, I can't wait to do activism again, and they're just doing nothing, when right now is the perfect time to strategize and organize so that we can come out of this stronger.
I really love that, looking at it as an opportunity to take a step back and, you know, figure out what to do next, and figure out how we're going to do that, and train ourselves and improve ourselves in a different way. And I have to say, you know, with a lot of slaughterhouses closing right now, that gives us some hope. I know that so many animals are being simply slaughtered and thrown in landfill right now. So much milk is just being disposed of. All the suffering that these animals have gone through. At the same time, it gives me hope that people will start rethinking what's happening and what we're doing. And, you know, just the very fact that people are appalled to know that, you know, at this landfill in Blenheim, Ontario, 1,200 pigs were just, you know, thrown in landfill in this past week. So, you know, people are appalled at that waste, and as appalled, you know, as they are appalled at what's happening on these factory farms. So I think bringing that to light for people will be important too. Is there anything else that you want to tell us, and how can people reach you, Amy, and be part of, you know, your workshops or webinars, or you know, how can they stay connected to you?
Yeah, so on social media, you can find me anywhere: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at Amy Soranno. So that's Soranno. You can also email me, amysoranno@outlook.com, anytime. I'm happy to do workshops or talks anywhere. So if you have a school or a group of people who are interested in something like that, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to come and chat. Yeah, I think that's it.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us, Amy. So I'm speaking to Amy Soranno from Meet the Victims, and we are very pleased to have had her here speaking to us today on Liberation Hour Radio, 102.7 Facebook, on 102.7 FM, and also on Facebook and YouTube. And thank you so much for joining us, Amy. We're very honored to have such an amazing activist with us today. Thank you.
And I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
I must have dreamed 1,000 dreams, been haunted by a million sleeps.
Now to a dire warning about climate change. If unprecedented changes are not made, and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Some animal rights activists have chained themselves to the door at Interior Savings. They want Interior Savings to stop sponsoring Ribfest. Megan here has even chained her neck to the door.
We are environmental activists, and we are animal rights activists. So it is very, very disappointing to see that Interior Savings isn't taking the Canadian climate crisis seriously. Canada just declared a national climate emergency driven by animal agriculture. They're just continuing to fund an extremely irresponsible event.
This is the world we live in. These are the hands we're given.
So the UN is calling on food producers and consumers to make changes, reduce the amount of meat and dairy we eat.
What side of history do you want to be on, Interior Savings? What side of history do you want to be on?
Climate change is irreversible. We should do everything we can to slow down the rate of change, and we have to step up, and we need to do so rapidly.
This year, multiple investigations have also taken place at Excelsior Hog Farm, the hog farm that supplies to Ribfest, and they have conducted time and time again criminal animal cruelty
And so again, Interior Savings, through their sponsorship of RibFest, they are paying for these animal atrocities to take place. And we're here to say enough is enough.
Say that an event like this kind of puts up a barrier.
We have tried so hard for so many years, and this is like a last resort. We don't want to be doing this. We don't want to be arrested. But unfortunately, this is what it's come to. We're going to continue escalating our tactics until we are taken seriously, and until Interior Savings stops their sponsorship, and until RibFest is shut down. This is just the beginning. We're not going to stop.